In January 2026, Iranian security forces carried out massacres against protesters on a scale not seen in decades. What followed was not a coordinated international response to protect civilians, but a dangerous, chaotic one. Military strikes, a blocked Strait of Hormuz, and economic shockwaves felt around the world. Was this really the best the world could do? It's hard to say that it was. This is a central dilemma of our time. When a government turns on its own people, the world faces two bad options. Do nothing and you're complicit in the atrocity. Intervene poorly and you risk becoming the very destruction you claimed to stop. Neither is acceptable. Let me show you what each failure actually looks like. First, non-intervention. In Rwanda, 1994, UN Force Commander Romeo Dallaire sent a direct warning. Mass killings are coming, weapons are stockpiled, there's a coordinated plan for genocide. The UN's answer? Not action, just an order to do nothing and stay neutral. In 100 days, over 800,000 people were killed. That's not a statistic. That's fathers who never came home. Entire communities erased from the earth, not because the world didn't know, but because we decided it wasn't worth the cost. Rwanda wasn't a failure of knowledge. It was a failure of priority. Non-intervention when the warnings are that loud is a choice and a moral failure you can never undo. Now, the other failure. It's Iran in 2026. There were documented massacres. The whole world was watching. But when powerful nations act without clear conditions, without broad support, and without a plan for what comes after, the humanitarian concern gets tangled with their own strategic interest. And you get exactly what we saw. Civilian casualties, a blocked Strait of Hormuz, and a world shaken with no one held responsible. So here's the problem, plain and simple. Poorly executed intervention creates chaos. Non-intervention creates atrocity. For decades, the world has swung between these two failures with no clear rules and no real accountability. And that has to change. The answer isn't whether we should intervene. It's under what conditions, with whose authorization, and with what accountability. In 2005, the UN adopted the responsibility to protect, R2P. When a government commits genocide or crimes against humanity, the international community has a duty to act. That was the right idea. But R2P has one fatal flaw. It depends entirely on the Security Council, where 5 permanent members can veto anything they don't like. And Iran proved it. The Council produced no real response, so the world got unilateral action instead. R2P wasn't wrong. It was incomplete. Two reforms fix it. First, an atrocity override. If the Security Council is blocked by a veto, a two-thirds majority of the General Assembly can authorize intervention instead. And this isn't a new idea I'm inventing. It's a built-on mechanism the UN had already used in 1950, when the General Assembly stepped in exactly because the Security Council was deadlocked. We're not asking the world to accept something untested. We're asking it to finish something it already started. Second, a mandatory post-intervention review board. Any nation that intervenes is held accountable for what happens afterward, with binding obligations to rebuild and protect civilians. If this had existed in 2011, Libya might not have become a decade-long civil war. You might ask, would powerful nations ever actually accept limits on their own power? In 1987, the Montreal Protocol got 197 countries, including bitter rivals, to phase out harmful chemicals even though it cost them money, because they knew the alternative was worse for everyone. Powerful nations don't lose strength by accepting rules. They lose strength when the world stops trusting them to follow any. Iran is proof. Intervene without accountability, and you don't look powerful. You look like exactly what you claim to be fighting. Rwanda taught us that silence kills. Iran taught us that force without accountability kills too. And Libya taught us that leaving after the cameras go home kills slowest of all. 3 warnings, yet 1 answer. Not whether to act, but how, under what conditions, with whose authorization, and with what accountability. The world doesn't need more powerful nations acting on instinct and calling it justice. It needs a system where protecting civilians is no longer a matter of which 5 countries feel like showing up. Because until that system exists, the gap between the powerful and the powerless will keep deciding who gets saved and who gets buried. Thank you.